the cost of living pressures continue to grow and grow and grow.
3 years of Labor government where they put in place 5,000 new regulations, and growing. And today we see on the newspaper or the TV, whatever it's called, that there's going to be more regulations. Now YouTube's banned and all sorts of websites are going to be filtered by the government, and we're going to have more and more regulations.
You know what really gets under my skin? I was talking to a mate who's a tradie the other day, and he told me something that absolutely floored me. He got a call to fix a simple leaky tap. Nothing fancy, just a basic plumbing job. But here's the catch. The job was just across the state border. What should have been a 20-minute fix turned into a bureaucratic nightmare that cost him hundreds of dollars in permits before he could even touch a wrench. And that got me thinking, when did Australia become so bloody complicated that fixing a tap requires government paperwork? Turns out, that's just the tip of the iceberg. What I discovered when I started digging into this will absolutely shock you. We're not just dealing with a bit of red tape here and there. We're living in one of the most overregulated countries on the planet, and it's costing every single Australian family thousands of dollars a year without them even realising it. Before we dive into how Australia's regulatory madness is costing you money every single day, if you want the uncensored analysis of the bureaucratic nightmare that's destroying Australian competitiveness, join our Patreon. We're the resistance fighting back against the red tape explosion that mainstream media won't investigate. Link in the description. Let's talk numbers, because numbers don't lie. The Business Council of Australia just released a report showing we've got a $110 billion red tape burden. That's not a typo. $110 billion annually. To put that in perspective, that's more than we spend on defence, education or health. We're literally spending more on bureaucratic compliance than we are on keeping Australians safe, educated or healthy. But here's where it gets absolutely mental. This year alone, the Australian government's regulatory burden increased by $1.925 billion. Nearly $2 billion in new red tape costs while families are struggling with cost of living pressures. The government's own analysis admits this, but they keep piling on more regulations anyway.
And yet we've seen a government with a ham-fisted energy policy that's making a bad situation worse.
For small businesses, and remember, 97.5% of regional businesses are small enterprises, the average compliance cost is $16,716 per year. That's 16 grand that could go toward hiring another worker, buying better equipment, or keeping prices lower for customers. Instead, it's going to lawyers, accountants, and compliance officers just to navigate the bureaucratic maze. Think about what this means for your local cafe owner. Before they can serve you a coffee, they need 36 separate licenses and approvals. 36! That's not running a business, that's running a compliance department with a coffee machine attached. Here's something that should make every Australian furious. The Business Council found that reducing our red tape burden by just 1% could unlock an extra $1 billion a year for the economy. 1%. We're talking about a $1 trillion economy being held back by bureaucratic nonsense that could be fixed with some common sense. Queensland businesses saw their median compliance costs double from $25,000 in 2021 to $50,000 in 2023. Double in just 2 years. While families are struggling to pay their electricity bills, businesses are spending an extra $25,000 just to comply with government paperwork.
The best part of, more than 10%, almost 15% of Australians are the people who have not paid a utility bill.
Regional businesses are dealing with up to 90 state regulations and 37 federal regulations. That's 127 different sets of rules they need to follow. Queensland's environmental regulations alone run to 2.73 million words. That's longer than the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it's just one state's environmental rules. Small business owners are spending 9.3 hours per week on compliance activities. That's more than a full working day every week just dealing with government paperwork, instead of serving customers, creating jobs, or innovating. It's economic insanity. Let's look at what this regulatory madness is doing to major projects that could create thousands of jobs. The McPhillamys Gold Project is worth $492 million and could create 788 jobs. It's facing years-long delays due to environmental and Indigenous heritage concerns, with potential postponements extending up to a decade. The Santos Barossa Gas Project is costing $1 million per day in legal challenges. $1 million per day. That's money that could be going toward wages, equipment, or community investment, but instead it's going to lawyers fighting through regulatory processes. Glencore cancelled their $2 billion Valeria coal project because of Queensland's coal royalty hike. That's 1,250 operational jobs that just disappeared because politicians decided to change the rules after companies had already made their investment decisions. The live sheep export ban is threatening a $77 million industry, disproportionately impacting Western Australian farmers. These aren't just statistics. These are real families, real communities, and real livelihoods being destroyed by regulatory decisions made by people who've never run a business or worked on a farm.
You know, we cannot disrupt policy and have for green policies to affect the mines and, as I say, the IR laws. We've got to act now to prevent this from happening, or we are in dire straits.
Here's what really gets me fired up. Australia's wine industry is taxed at 29% of wholesale value under the wine equalisation tax. That's the highest wine tax globally. We're making our own wine industry uncompetitive through our own stupid tax policies. Meanwhile, countries like Singapore are streamlining their regulatory processes to attract business investment. New Zealand went through comprehensive deregulation in the 1980s and 1990s that boosted their economic growth. The United Kingdom has 1 in 2 out rules where they have to remove 2 regulations for every new one they create. What's Australia doing? We're going in the opposite direction. We're creating more regulations, more compliance costs, and more barriers to doing business. We're making ourselves less competitive while other countries are making themselves more attractive to investors.
We need a government that realises that it has an important role to play in taking those pressures away.
The OECD praised Australia as having world-leading regulatory practices in 2021, but that's just measuring our ability to create sophisticated measurement systems. We're brilliant at measuring how much red tape we're creating, but we're terrible at actually reducing it. Here's the most frustrating part of this whole mess. Both major political parties are complicit in this regulatory explosion. Labor promised to reduce red tape but increase the burden by $1.925 billion in 2025. The Liberals talk about deregulation but fail to deliver substantial reductions when they were in power. Politicians get rewarded for creating new regulations because it looks like they're doing something about whatever problem is in the headlines, but they never get punished for the cumulative effect of all these regulations strangling the economy. The last comprehensive stocktake of Australia's regulatory burden was done in 2014. That's over a decade ago. We're flying blind, creating new regulations without understanding the total impact on businesses and families. An alliance of nearly 30 industry groups is calling for a 25% reduction in regulatory costs by 2030. 25%. That shows you how massive the problem has become when business groups are asking for a quarter of the regulatory burden to be removed. The mainstream media won't tell you how Australia's regulatory explosion is making everything more expensive and destroying our international competitiveness. They won't explain how small businesses are drowning in compliance costs while politicians create more red tape every year. They won't investigate how we've become one of the most overregulated countries in the world per capita. Join our Patreon for uncensored analysis of the bureaucratic nightmare that's strangling Australian prosperity and making life harder for ordinary families. The numbers don't lie, mate. We've got more laws per person than almost any other developed country. We're spending over $100 billion annually on regulatory compliance. Small businesses are spending more time on government paperwork than serving customers. Major projects worth billions are being cancelled or delayed for years. This isn't just about business profits, this is about your cost of living. Every dollar spent on regulatory compliance is a dollar that gets passed on to consumers through higher prices. Every project delayed by red tape is jobs that don't get created and economic growth that doesn't happen. Australia used to be known as a place where you could have a go and get ahead through hard work and innovation. Now we're becoming known as a place where you need 36 licenses to pour a coffee and hundreds of dollars in permits to fix a tap across a state border. The solution isn't rocket science. Other countries have done it successfully. We need political leaders with the courage to actually cut regulations instead of just creating new ones. We need sunset clauses that automatically expire regulations unless they're renewed. We need regulatory budgets that force trade-offs when new rules are created. Most importantly, we need Australians to understand that this isn't just a business problem. It's a problem that affects every family through higher prices, fewer job opportunities, and reduced economic growth. The regulatory burden is a hidden tax on every Australian, and it's time we started treating it like one. To see the latest Australian crisis, click this video here.